Good evening and welcome to Wisdom Wednesday. Can't tell if I'm live. Good evening and welcome to Wisdom Wednesday. I'm back. My camera just went completely blank, so I'm about to check and see if I am live online. I'm here. Okay, cool. It is Wednesday night and I'm so grateful to be here. This has been a week, y'all, and I am here to talk about one of my arch nemesis topics today, just because I think that everyone has their own way of dealing with difficult people. And my way has been working for me for a long time until the Holy Spirit tapped me on this shoulder and then tapped me on this shoulder and told me, no, no, you can't go under it. You can't go around it. You can't go over it. You got to go through it. So tonight, we're going to talk about difficult people. And if this is your first time catching one of my lives, then I gotta let you know I'm Naomi. I go by the How To Chick. I'm a child of God, a wife, a mom, an attorney, a coach, a mentor, and a speaker. But most importantly, I believe that you can do anything, but you cannot do everything, and you have to choose wisely. I come on Wednesday nights around 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to talk a little bit about life, a lot about love, and most importantly, about relationships. The relationships that you have with God and yourself being key topics, because those necessarily affect all of your other relationships. And tonight I'm here to talk about difficult people and difficult relationships. I used to consider myself a difficult people whisperer in many ways. And that is primarily because I'm the type of person that doesn't really take things personally. I spent a lot of time in spaces where I was in customer service. I started working, doing, I think my first job was in childcare, but then after that, my jobs were customer service facing. I faced people. I worked in movie theaters. I worked in restaurants, and then I worked in sales for 4 years before I went to law school and eventually became an attorney. And what I recognized in those spaces, especially the public facing spaces, is that I was good at navigating people, particularly difficult people. And so when there was a situation that would come up that needed to be diffused, I was often called on to help navigate rude customers, persnickety, particular customers. I had a client when I was in business to business sales that absolutely no one else wanted to deal with. And to me, he was the nicest, the sweetest, the most generous man. I think at the end, I had somewhere between 18 and 22 accounts with him. And he wasn't a problem for me because I could handle him, right? I knew how to deal with him. And today we're talking about dealing with difficult people, because sometimes when we have jobs where we have to interface with the public, when we have, situations that arise where we have to, because of the position that we're in, interface with people, we can do that. But then when there's just someone in our lives, a family member, a relative, someone that we just know, a friend, or just, a person that we work with at work that's on our team, they're not, right, a client, and they're difficult, it can be very tough to just grin and bear it. Grinning and bear it is kind of easy when your livelihood depends on it. It can be kind of easy when this person is going to have very little effect on you going forward, right? You take the call, you apologize, you smile, you give them a little credit, and you move on, knowing that they were probably dead wrong. But it's low stakes. Higher stakes are situations where you're dealing with somebody who you have a relationship with, somebody who you know well, someone who is persistently and consistently difficult, and a really unpleasant person, a person with whom you've had multiple run-ins, or a person with whom, you have these people who just kind of rub you the wrong way. Like, it's a person, right, who every time you guys want to try to do something, this is the person who has a reason why it's not going to work, right? You may be in a friend group and you guys are trying to plan a group trip, and this person never has any ideas about what you can do to actually take the trip, but they got a complaint for every idea somebody else has, right? Or you have that relative who everyone knows is like moderately mentally ill, who kicks up at every occasion, and you always feel like you should invite them, but you always have to be mentally prepared for the tantrum or for the meltdown or for the way that they're going to just make you feel. So when it comes to dealing with unpleasant people, with difficult people, with people with whom we may just simply have difficult interactions, because there's a difference between a difficult person and a person that we have difficult interactions with, a person that we may not have the best relationship with. There is a difference. And y'all, what's a one? My mic is not working. I don't even know if I have audio at this point. The light just went completely off on my mic. And I don't know. It's not even plugged in. Y'all, I'm about to give up. My technology is just losing it tonight. My mic unplugged and then my camera unplugged. And I don't even know what's happening at this point, but we're here. Anyway, as I was saying, there is a difference between a person with whom you have difficult and unpleasant encounters and a person who is a difficult person. And I think that's important to recognize, right? Because there are some people that we're just not going to get along with. There are some people who may not like you. You know, I have talked to some people who know people that they have known since middle school and elementary school, and these people don't like them because of something that happened 20, 30, 40 years ago. There is a difference between a difficult person and a person with whom you have difficult interactions. And it's important to know the difference. So many times, like at work, we have to be around people who are just difficult people. Every time it's time to work on a joint project, they have conflicts, they have unavailabilities, they're going to be on vacation. Oh no, they can't do this. They're not available. They're never available, right? But this is something that has to be done. We all agreed on when it had to be done by, but now when it's time to do the work, you're not available. There are a few things that we can do to lessen the impact that difficult people have on us. And I wanted to talk about this today because what I recognized today years old, was that my previous strategy with difficult people had just been go over them, go around them. Like, I'm just gonna, I understand you're not available. I'm just gonna do the work. I'm gonna get somebody else to do the work. We're gonna get it done. But again, all of my equipment is losing its mind. Difficult people come around. Difficult people come into our lives. Difficult people become part of our experience as part of our assignment. And I may have to edit this and re-upload it to YouTube because I've just been having technical difficulty after technical difficulty after technical difficulty, which means this is important and somebody needs this. I don't know who needs this. I don't know who tonight is for, but I'm telling you right now that it's for somebody. Because everyone has their own personality types and quirks, and personality quirks do not always make for difficult relationships. I've always found curiosity to be the best way to deal with different personality types. because usually what ruins interpersonal relationships between people who have different personality types is just poor communication, right? I don't understand how you operate. You don't understand how I operate. And so the way that we operate between each other is, um, neither one of us are comfortable with it, right? And so typically with that poor communication comes a lack of empathy, right? Because I don't understand why you are the way you are. You don't understand why I am the way I am. And then we tend to start criticizing each other. And that communication breakdown can result in a difficult relationship. It can be a difficult interpersonal relationship, working relationship, friendship, whatever it is. But the thing about it is in a situation where there's poor communication, typically what's happening is that the two personality types communicate differently. So for me, I'm a very expressive communicator. So I figure out what I'm going to say as I'm saying it. So there may be a lot of words involved, there's a lot of talking with my hands involved, and I typically communicate knowing where I'm going. I have an end goal in mind. And so if I haven't expressed that end goal to you, if we haven't communicated where I'm going, then you might think, well, why is she even attempting to have a conversation with me about this? Because it sounds like she has her mind made up. But there are other people who communicate differently. There are people who communicate. I'm a very direct communicator. I say what I mean what I say. There are people who thrive in indirect communication. Some people call them passive aggressive, some people call them just, borderline rude. There are people who are not able to communicate in difficult circumstances. If it's something that they disagree with or something that they don't feel comfortable with, they just won't say it because they're not comfortable with that. That causes a communication breakdown. If you have to be in relationship with someone, if you have to work with someone, it is very, very difficult to do so if they will not communicate with you. So the second thing is a lack of empathy. And this happens a lot in situations where people are differently able. For example, with autistic people with ADHD, individuals appear, right, to care only about themselves because I have ADHD. And what that means is I speak very fast, I speak very loud, I tend to interrupt. And I typically tell people that. And I also have, for many, many years, practiced ask 3 questions before you talk about yourself and moderating my interruptions to people who don't know me well. That is because I know what my tendencies are and how they come across to third parties. But there are people who are insensitive to it or simply don't recognize that they have those tendencies. And so it makes people feel that they don't care about their point of view and their perspective because they feel that they monopolize the conversation. They do not accept others' viewpoints and they don't care about how other people feel about outcomes or situations. This typically comes, and I've heard this as a criticism of a lot of people who deal with autism. And I think it's really important to be curious and to ask questions for this reason, because sometimes people get labels placed on them as being difficult or being rude, and really they are just differently abled. And when we struggle to understand other people's like frame of reference, it can also make us insensitive, even though we don't think we're being insensitive to their emotions or to their circumstances. And that, even though we're blaming them for being difficult and hard to work with, it really means that we lack empathy. So the last thing is criticism, and it stems from the same place usually, a lack of communication, because communication is not what we say, it's what's understood. And so critical people are the types of people who look at the communication styles that people have, that look at the way that people regulate themselves, and they say, oh, this person is selfish, this person is rude, this person is uncaring, this person doesn't have either they criticize how they do something or they criticize their motivations from doing it. And critical people can be the most difficult people to be around. I don't know if you've ever dealt with like an older relative that always has something rude to say about somebody. They can be they can be really challenging. And it's not just older people, there are a lot of younger people who are critical too. Highly critical people can be hard to be around because it seems like nothing and no one meets their standards. And to be perfectly honest, this could be just me, but I feel like if somebody is talking about somebody else, they're going to be talking about me the same way. And so sometimes we struggle with understanding whether this person is having a difficult moment, whether they're just difficult with us, or whether they're a difficult person. And I came up with kind of a rubric to work with to figure out whether this person is really a difficult person or whether you have a difficult relationship with that person. And the first thing is they typically tend to insist on having everything their way, exactly their way with no deviation. Second thing is they result to an ad hominem attack if they don't have their way, exactly their way with no deviation. This is a person who's going to belittle you, who's going to insult you, and they may not do it to your face. You may hear about it from someone else. The next thing is this person will leave you out of important conversations. They won't make an attempt to include you. And this is something to recognize if you're in a workplace. If you're working, for example, I worked in an office where I had an important case and I found out other people on the team were meeting with upper management on the case that I was supposed to be the lead on without me. That's not normal. And that's a mark of a difficult person. The next is that they have difficulty with emotional regulation. This one is probably the key, but we have to be emotionally regulated ourselves to recognize that the person can't regulate themselves emotionally. And that is if they feel a certain way, they're going to act a certain way. They're not able to look outside themselves and look for other reasons why the situation could be what it is. And so they're immediately going to become reactive. An inability to emotionally regulate means that they are going to be reactive. People avoid them. This one is pretty simple. Like if you have a person, and I talked about this a few weeks ago, if there's a person that everybody has the same problem with and people don't want to be around them, it's definitely not you. They're a difficult person. The next one is toxic traits like being gossipy, being really, really bossy or rude to people. There are people that we all know that exhibit these traits. And there are, especially when it's a family member, sometimes people are like, that's just how this person is. Yes, but that doesn't mean they're not a difficult person. In a work setting, in a volunteer setting, they could second guess everything you do or say. For every idea you come up with, they have a reason why it's not a good idea. But they're not giving you a way to work around it, right? They're just criticizing. That's a difficult person. If you don't feel comfortable around them, like all of these things are there, but you also feel uncomfortable around them, and you sense signs of jealousy, codependency, or other red flags, this is probably a difficult person and not just a situation where you have a difficult relationship with that person. And the thing about difficult people is there are times when people bother us because honestly, they trigger us, they remind us of something in ourselves. If we're already frustrated, whether it's because of something that we've overcome, a lot of times we end up in relationship with people that remind us of the people who were closest to us that exhibited some of these traits. And that will make it like, what do they call it? Nails on a chalkboard. These people will be intolerable to us because they are actually triggering us. So the difference between recognizing a person as a difficult person and a person who's difficult with you is looking at that list and making sure that these things are things that are objective third party things. How do you deal with a difficult person? Well, we can't just wipe the earth of people that we don't get along with. We can prepare ourselves to deal with difficult persons. And the first thing is, I said this earlier, be curious. Be insatiably curious. Because one thing I've almost always found to be true with difficult people is they are lonely and they need someone to listen to them and hear them out. And and I'm going to give you guys the caveat. I'm going to give you the steps to dealing with a difficult person before, right? I talk to you about why I believe that sometimes difficult people are our assignments and we can't, right, go over them, under them, and around them. We got to go straight through them. So the first thing is be curious, listen to them. Many of these people are very lonely. They have isolated a lot of people. They don't have great relationships. Listen to them and be curious about them. Try to get into their shoes and understand their point of view. And I'm telling you, I understand that this can be difficult when you're dealing with a project, when you have a timeline, when you're trying to get things done, when you have a million other things on your plate. When you have things to do, it can be work. Try to make the space and make the time when you know that you're dealing with a difficult person to listen to them and get into their shoes. Honor both of your needs. So, as I was speaking about earlier, sometimes the empathy piece helps you to recognize that you're dealing with someone who's differently abled, who may be on the autism or Asperger spectrum, who may have ADHD. And you may think, I don't have the capacity for this. But if you listen to them, if you get into their shoes, you may find a way to honor their needs while respecting yours at the same time. The fourth thing is to use humor to deflect. This works very, very well. And it helps them recognize that you're not taking them or the situation too seriously because many times they have dealt with so much rejection already, especially when you're dealing with someone on the spectrum. They've dealt with people telling them they're difficult. They've dealt with people shutting them out. They've dealt with people walking away and saying, I don't want to deal with them. They have dealt with all of that. And they're expecting rejection. So humor helps to diffuse the tension and helps to make them soften because many times a difficult person is only difficult because they have up walls. The next thing is to practice because one day your humor may work and the next day they may be offended by it. Sorry. You just got to start over from one. Listen to them, get into their shoes, find a way in that situation to honor your needs and their needs at the same time, and use a little humor. And then when all else fails, when you absolutely feel like this encounter and this situation with them is going so badly, maybe they have become very reactive, maybe they have become snarky and rude, and you just know that if you continue to engage with them on this particular subject, you're going to end up destroying the relationship. Leave the situation, create a buffer. Practice self care. Recognize that when you're dealing with this difficult person, it's not your job to bring yourself down, right? You don't have to hide who you are to honor who they are. If you can't do both at the same time, you need to take some space from them, create a buffer, and practice your own self care because not every difficult person is your assignment. And so you may end up in a situation where you're working with a difficult person. They're not necessarily your assignment, or you're not sure they're your assignment, and you can't get away from them. Self care, therapy, documentation. Make sure you are documenting your interactions with this person in writing, especially if they are doing things that are undermining you, especially if they are doing things that are in any way racist, sexist, ist of any kind. Document, 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 but create a buffer and practice self care and start over and recognize that for difficult people who are your assignment, and this is what I came to talk to you about, you will know they're your assignment if you have asked. You guys know I'm unapologetically a God girl, and you keep encountering the same type of person over and over everywhere you go. It's the same level. They act just like this next person, and I've been dealing with that. I've been dealing with that, this was a person that I had decided I was going around over a parachute, taking a plane, going to outer space. I'm not dealing with this person. And I keep encountering the same personality in multiple other people with whom I have been paired to work or do ministry with or whatever. Just everywhere I go, it seems like I encounter a personality just like this. And it's so crazy. And finally today I was like, God, give us free. And he was like, no, that's your assignment. And over the last week, I realized that when they are your assignment, you're not going to be able to escape. Yes, you can do buffering. Yes, you can practice self care. Yes, you can get yourself out of situations where they have become reactive and abusive, but you're going to have to re engage. And you can re-engage honoring what you need and honoring what they need. And I always say boundaries are for you, they're not against other people. So I encourage you when dealing with difficult people to set your boundaries. I have some boundaries. We're not going to be cursing, we're not going to be screaming and yelling, we're not going to be going, we're not going to be doing ad hominem attacks. Like, you can be upset at how I do things, you can be upset at what I say, you can not agree with the way I live my life, but that doesn't mean that you get to attack me personally, right? We're not physically fighting. We're not in middle school. Like, boundaries. Say them, repeat them, and honor them. So when they're breached, immediately remove yourself from the situation. Create a buffer. That block button exists. Walk away and do your self care, your journaling, your therapy, making sure you come back to center. Do not leave who you are to meet this person, because that's what happens a lot with difficult people. They get us, they become reactive, so we react to them. And now we're operating in a space that they're comfortable with. What do they say? Don't argue with stupid people. They'll drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. That's why we don't get into conflict with difficult people, because difficult people exist to transfer negative energy. They want to get you mad. They're poking and picking to piss you off so that then they can say, oh, look, she called herself a Christian and look how she reacted when I did XYZ. She's nobody's Christian. Why is she in leadership? I don't know why anybody would listen to her anyway. They exist, difficult people, to teach us what Jesus has always known: the wheat and the tares will grow together. And I heard a saying a while ago, and this is something I live with now. It said this: preach the gospel, use words when necessary. We are not out here to live a life that, you know, is so perfect that everyone knows that, we are Miss Goody Two Shoes. We are not out here to honor religion. We are not out here to preach and teach and live however we want to live in private. We are out here to live a life that shows people the power that God has in our lives. And part of that is learning how to navigate difficult people with respect for them, and while honoring the boundaries that we have set for ourselves, so that we're not coming to where they are. We're not reacting. When they throw whatever they throw at you, when they're cursing and screaming at you, you're not reacting in kind. What you're doing is you're saying, I understand that you're frustrated and I'm sorry, but I have a boundary, and that is, we do not do this: cursing, screaming, yelling, hitting, throwing. We don't do that. So I'm going to leave now. Do it. Create that buffer, do your self-care, rinse and repeat. Because when difficult people are your assignment, they're your assignment because in the past you've had that person or another person who was similarly difficult, and you have allowed them to cause you to leave who you are to meet them where they are. Difficult people should level us up. We should not be leveling down to deal with them. And once they recognize that no matter what they do, we're going to be curious, we're going to be kind, we are going to be moved with compassion for their situation, but we will not allow their reactivity to derail us. And we will not allow the way that they react and respond to push us away. They begin to open. They feel seen. They no longer feel like we're going to leave or put the sort of boundaries that other people have put into place, which is, I don't mess with her. So they may come around every now and again, but they know that nobody really cares about them. Nobody is in real, genuine relationship with them. And what this pattern and practice does is show them that you are, that you're going to continue to show up for them, that you're going to continue to care about the things that concern them, that you're going to continue to be moved with compassion for them, that you're going to continue to meet them where they are and honor their needs without coming down to their level of reactivity and response. And eventually, I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying it happens overnight. I'm not even saying it happens over years. I'm saying it happens. They will become less reactive if they're your assignment. They will become more responsive. You will have better conversations. You will build a level of trust. You will have better communications. They're going to stop picking at you and violating your boundaries, because they're going to begin to value the relationship that they have with you, because they were your assignment. So dealing with difficult people does require you to make sure that they're your assignment, that they are a difficult person, and that this is not just a difficult relationship, right? And that you exercise the steps to show them that you are a safe person, that you care for them, but that you are not going to be moved by their emotional reactivity off of who you are as a person. When you do that, your relationships with difficult people do tend to change. I've seen it for myself. I can tell you that it happens. I can tell you that I'm still waiting on it to happen in some places, but that's okay because I'm willing to wait when it's my assignment. So I encourage you, if you're dealing with a difficult person, to go through the steps. We all have difficult people in our lives, but it is most important to make sure that this difficult person is your assignment. Have you been dealing with this same type of behavior over and over and over in multiple different relationships? That's your assignment. You have to make sure that this person is a difficult person and that they just don't have a difficult relationship with you for some reason. I gave you the steps for that. Evaluate it. Make sure, is this person a person that has issues with everybody? Is this a person who constantly is dealing with complaints of bullying or harassment or being inappropriate in some way? And then the final thing is to go through the steps. When you're in relationship with a difficult person, you have to make sure that you follow the steps. Listen and be curious. Be empathetic and put yourself in their shoes. Use humor to deflect. Do not allow them to bring you to their level when they become reactive. And when all else fails and they violate a boundary, leave the situation, create a buffer, and do your self care before you re engage with them. And keep doing it. Keep doing it. Difficult people still need people. So when they are our assignment, we have to care for ourselves while we care for others. I know this is a hard one, guys, but it's one that I was convicted of for myself, and I thought I would go ahead and share with you because we are sometimes all in the same boat. And that boat is God has an assignment for us that we are trying with all of our mights to get away from. And that's why the same types of difficult people show up in our lives, because God is like, no, no, this is your assignment. Remember, you can do anything, but you cannot do everything. Let God do the choosing. Have a wonderful evening, and I hope to see you next week on Wisdom Wednesday. Good night.